Ich heiße Rick Landmann. Ich bin der Enkel von mein Opa Martin Oettinger. Aber ich habe in New York geboren, and my English is so much better than my German. Entschuldige, I apologize, but I will be giving my talk in English. This will be a video focusing on Martin Oettinger, or Oettinger, and his birth in Uffenheim. And in order to start off my story, I want to start with Martin's father, Gabriel Oettinger, who was born in 1862 and died in 1903. Now, from the picture here, Gabriel is the only Jew who's wearing a beard and a hat, but if you notice, this is in Uffenheim, he's drinking beer with his neighbors, including two police officers. So back when this was taken, which was somewhere probably in the 1890s, 1900, towards the end of Gabriel's life, the Jews of Uffenheim, not many in number, but were having no problems living with their neighbors. And this generation, Gabriel's generation, were the ones that saw Jews going from non-citizens to, after 1871, becoming full German citizens living in Germany. Now, this is Gabriel and his wife Hannchen Schwarzbart, who, when they were much younger, when they just got married. And here on Schmiedsgasse 13a is the house that the Oettingers lived in, and you can see there's a boot hanging in front of the store. So I think when Gabriel was alive, he sold shoes or boots. I really don't know. That house is still there, and we went and visited it in 1989 with my parents. This is the birth certificate for Martin. Martin was born in 1892, and he will live until 1968. But he was a proud Uffenheimer. This is part of a family tree, not prepared by me, but I am on it. There I am. This is just one branch of the Oettinger family tree. The Oettinger Jewish family can be traced all the way back to the 1500s in Talmesing, and was a very well-known family in Germany and in New York State. One of my relatives, Richard Oettinger, ran for Senate in New York State, but lost to Senator Buckley years ago. But this is again part of why Opa war ganz stolz darauf, being German. The Oettingers were German, living in Germany for hundreds of years. Now, this is harder to see, but this in Opa's handwriting is the people all the way down from Gabriel, and there's me, Ricky, although he didn't put any information down. But these are like the birth dates and the death dates of my closer family relatives of my grandfather. And it also shows that his siblings, Albert was a little bit older than him, born in 1890. Bertha, his older sister, is 1891. My Opa Martin is 1892. And the younger one, Elsa, is 1893. So they had children in quick succession. Then that was it. And then, as I said, in 1903, Gabriel passes away. Now, after Gabriel passes away, Hannchen has to bring up the four children by herself. Here is a picture of Hannchen and Martin and the two sisters. And sadly, again, this is shortly before Hannchen passes away. She dies in 1915. So before she dies and World War I breaks out, both Albert and Martin join the army for the Kaiser. Here is Martin in his uniform with his dog Putzi. Here is Martin. Again, my side of the family is the shortest, where he's in the front. That's Martin and his German World War I Army group. Now, here is Albert, still in his uniform, and if you've noticed, Martin is no longer in his uniform. When his mother passed away, Martin was able to get out of the army and go back to Uffenheim to take care of his two younger sisters, one younger, one older sister, who were living there by themselves. Here is the death certificate of 1915 of Hannchen Oettinger. Here is the military pass in 1916. So, again, I don't know the exact meaning of anything, but this is the inside page, and I'm assuming that this has something to do with when Martin was released from the army. Now, just to wrap up on Hannchen and Gabriel, their graves are still in Germany. Uffenheim did not have enough Jews to have their own cemetery. So nearby in Emmertshofen, there was a Jewish cemetery for all of the Jews from that surrounding area. And they were buried in chronological order, starting from the top of the hill. So Gabriel and Hannchen are not next to each other. And as you go down the hill, it totally stops in the 1930s. Here is Martin in 1947. He went back to Emmertshofen, and he is standing, and we have two photographs, one in front of his mother and one in front of his father. So in 1989, when my mother, father, and I went to Uffenheim and Emmertshofen, we were able to find the different tombstones by the shapes. So we were able to walk around from that old black and white photograph, and if we saw a large tombstone of a certain shape, we were able to figure out where it was. Martin had an insert placed into Gabriel's tombstone after 1947 because it was so hard to read. So now the war is over. Martin leaves Uffenheim and moves to Nurnberg, where he meets Else Kramer, and they get married in Nurnberg. Else Kramer is from Friedberg. Her father was the cantor Max Kramer. Her aunt was Helene Kramer, who grew up in an orphanage that Bertha Pappenheim was running. And then as Helene got older, Helene ran the orphanage and became good friends with Bertha Pappenheim. Of course, when the Nazis came to power, they tried to move the children to France. And then Helene was able, when the war broke out, to get to Portugal, to get onto a ship to Cuba, and then come to the United States in the early 1940s. When my grandmother, Oma Else, was near her death in the 1990s, she gave me a necklace and a letter from Bertha Pappenheimer to Helene and told me to keep this. This was important. So I still have the necklace and the letter that Helene got from Bertha Pappenheim, who gave it to my grandma, who gave it to me. Now, when Opa married Elsa, this was his engagement present. He hand painted this, calligraphied it, and he gave it to my grandmother. One should every day a little bit to listen to a song, to read a poem, to look at some nice paintings, and if possible to say a few nice kind words. Here they are, Martin and Elsie, on their honeymoon in Venice. And here they are when they moved into Nurnberg at 110 Humboldtstraße. And this painting of his mother is in my house. And these metalworks from Mr. Thieralf I will explain later. But they were living in Nurnberg. This is the house, 110 Humboldtstraße. And although the area of Nurnberg was bombed heavily in the war, this building basically still stood. So when we went there in 1989, as you can see, it's the same building. We were able to sort of see where my mother grew up. She was born there, and she lived there until 1933. Now, we'll go back to the rise of Nazism. So, where Jews were living quite well in the end of the Kaiser era and the Weimar Republic, when Nazism came, both cities, Uffenheim became virulently Nazi, and Nurnberg became virulently Nazi. So Martin, who was a very proud German, was also Jewish and had a very difficult time dealing with the rise of Nazism. Now, in Uffenheim at this time, his sister Bertha took the Schmiedsgasse building and became a Hüte und Münze store. So I guess it's like hats and gloves, and ran a business in Uffenheim. But when the boycotts came to try to kick out and get all the Jews to leave so that Uffenheim can be Judenfrei, Bertha Oettinger was one of the stores that was targeted. And I've gotten these from a friend of mine who lived in Uffenheim. Her daughter did a study and through the newspapers came up with these different clippings and articles about Bertha Oettinger and the people who took it over. Now, Opa at this time is very anti-Nazi in Nuremberg. According to my grandmother telling me the story, Julia Streicher, the publisher of Der Stürmer, was in Nuremberg, and my Opa, who's as short as me, he was probably 5 feet tall, kicked Julia Streicher in the tuchus, in his behind, and ran away. But Julia Streicher knew who he was and put his name on the list. So on March 23rd of 1933, two things happened. It was the opening day of Dachau, where people were arrested and sent to Dachau. It was also the day Opa was tipped off, and when he was at work, he left when he saw the SA, the stormtroopers, coming up the street, went to the railroad station, and went to Strasbourg. When the Gestapo came to ring my grandmother's doorbell, my grandmother honestly could say, I have no idea where he was. Grandma and Grandpa had a plan that Opa would go to any place where he had a friend or a relative and then send a picture postcard from that city, and that was the clue that my homage should take my 6-year-old mother and go to that city. So it ended up that Opa went to Strasbourg, where Albert's wife's family, the Bings, were living. And Albert and Martin, Elsie, and my mother were all united again by May of 1933 and were living on Rue de Travel in Strasbourg. And this is a business card from the business that Opa was running in Strasbourg. Now, I think that's Albert. That's my mother. That's her cousin Hannah. Whoops, sorry. That's my cousin Hannah, and that's her cousin Anthony. I don't see my grandma and grandpa in this picture. I am assuming it's a wedding of one of the Bings in Strasbourg. Anthony has a college named after him. He was he's still alive, as is my mother. And they were he was a professor in Harvard and in computers and mathematics. And they've actually named a college after Anthony Oettinger. You can Google it. Hannah is from more of the taller side of the family, in that look how much taller she is than my mother. So here they're living, this is before 1937 or so, in Strasbourg. Now comes 1937. My grandma and grandpa, Elsa and Martin, they apply to be able to get these stateless types of passports and apply with visas to try to get to the United States. So here are their cards. You can see 1937. It expired in 1940. But luckily, it was not through the Ottingers or through the Bings that my family was saved. This side of the family was saved because Elsa, my grandmother's father, Max Kramer, his brother Harry was already in America and owned a restaurant, Ye Olde Shop House, in Lower Manhattan. So he was able to sign the affidavit for his brother Max and his brother's wife Paula, and his brother's daughter Elsa, and her husband Martin, and my mother Lisa, to be able to come to America at various times in 1939. So that is how that side of the family was saved. The other Oettingers did make it to America, Albert, Elsa, and Bertha. But later on, even as late as 1941, they went through Spain and Portugal to get to America. Now, Martin and Elsa, again, they're two different Elsa. I'll call her Oma. My Oma and Opa and my mother came to America and landed on Washington's birthday, February 22nd in 1939, and they took the Ile-de-France out of Le Havre. So now, Martin and Oma and Opa and my mother are living in Washington Heights in Manhattan with a German-speaking neighborhood. Sadly, my grandmother's mother, Paula Midas Kramer, she dies within 9 months of coming to America. And my great-grandfather, Max, he died right after around Pearl Harbor Day in 1941 in December. So Martin has been an orphan since 1915, and Oma is now an orphan, and the two of them are living in Washington Heights. And my mother, Lisa, marries my father, Henry, and these are his parents, Joseph and Regina. Regina is a Grünebaum from Hellstein, and Joseph was born in Husiaten area of Galicia. His parents moved to Munich around 1900. They will die in Theresienstadt in the summer of 1942. They did not get to America. But this is the Washington Heights nuclear family. My mother is 19 years old. My father is 26. And this is the start of the family in America. My mother got to America. She was almost 12 years old. She went to George Washington High School. She went to Columbia Dental Hygiene Program. And my mother assimilated into New York's Jewish community. My father got out of Dachau after Kristallnacht at 18, went to London, came to America, then joined the United States Army after America entered the war. He goes across with the 3rd Infantry North Africa to Sicily, to Italy, to Anzio, to France, and then his group is there on the day that Dachau is liberated, and Colonel Porter allows my father to enter Augsburg a day before the official liberation to see if his family was alive. I have a whole video on my father and his life story. Sadly, no one in his family survived after 1940. So here they are. I'm not born yet. With my brother, that's my grandma, my grandpa, my mother, and they're living in Manhattan when my brother was born. In 1950, they moved to Queens, to the house that my mother still lives in the house that I was brought up in. Here I am, and my older brother, and Martin, around, I guess, 1953. I'm born in June of 52. Now, an interesting thing, Opa really never learned to be fluent in English. So, as you can see, he did mail a postcard to my brother and I, Bobby and Ricky Landsman, and it was in German. So, so much of the German that I am able to speak is because when Opa came out to visit us, everyone in the house would speak German. Even the little kids like me and my brother would speak English and a little German, but we were able to understand a lot more of the German. And then on days where my parents would drop me off in Washington Heights, again, everyone, if you went to the bakery, if you walked on the sidewalk, you heard German. I am one of these strange people who, born in America, but grew up with a pre-Nazi German Jewish culture with the ability to actually understand German. And I have here, this is when other people were learning about other Humpty Dumpty, my family was reading to me Struwwelpeter, how Kasper ist sein Super nicht. So, again, I am an American-born Jewish person who grew up with a German cultural background. Good example. Here I am wearing lederhosen that my grandpa probably picked up on one of his trips. There's my grandma. There's my mother. This is on the German Jewish side of the Catskills. The German Jews did not go to the Route 17 Borscht Belt, where the Nevele, the Concord, Falls View. There the people spoke Yiddish and ate Central European food like borscht. The Christian hotel owners who came to the Catskills in the 1870s and 80s and started a business, they took in the German Jewish refugees because they spoke German and we ate German. So this is at Bel Air Ski Center. You can tell there's the cable for the chairlift in the background. And we would go skiing at Bel Air in the wintertime, and we would stay at the Pine Hill Arms in the summertime. And that's my brother. Those lederhosen probably were on him at one point in time, too. Now, Martin and Elsa would go back and forth in the summer. If they weren't at Pine Hill when they were younger, they would travel back and stay in Garmisch for the summertime. And this is when Opa also, if he found something that was Jewish, he would buy it and he would bring it home. What is funny is I am now 70 years old. I am much older than either my grandma or my grandpa. Grandpa again died when he was 75. So I just look at these pictures when Grandpa was probably 60, but to me, they always look like they're much older because they were my grandparents. Here is Grandpa and me in front of the Pine Hill Arms in the Catskills. That was not our car. But the interesting thing is, Opa is taller than me. So I am now 5'1". My mother is 4'6" at 95. So I think I am probably around 11 or 12 in that picture. And again, this is my Opa. They called him on the hat, it says the King of Pine Hill. And he was on vacation and two of those waitresses were kissing him. So this is Opa in Pine Hill. Now we're getting closer to my bar mitzvah in 1965. This is Bertha, this is Elsa, his two sisters who came to my bar mitzvah. I believe Albert already had passed away, and that's why he wasn't there at my bar mitzvah. My father's cousin, Irma Schwarzbart, was a doctor, a female doctor in New York. And I do remember her, and she was also at my bar mitzvah. This is a very typical photograph that I found. So Oma and Opa would travel to Europe maybe once a year, and they would take the SS United States ship, which docked on the west side of Manhattan. And we would go and pick them up. So here is Opa walking slowly behind the three of us. I'm almost skipping in the front. My mother and my grandmother and a porter who is carrying the luggage. And again, they mostly stayed with the Maurers in Garmisch. Now, this is a postcard that my grandfather, that Opa, wrote to me on the other side of the postcard. And I found it when I was going through his things years ago. I do not really remember it, but when I look at it, it seems to show a man breaking chains. So, in my mind, Opa was always a fighter, whether it was fighting against the Nazis or the injustices. Even at his funeral, I remember the rabbi mentioning again how Opa was a fighter. And I think I got a lot of my social justice relevance from Opa. Even when my mother said I should go to law school, she said, Opa always thought you'd be a good lawyer. So here I am at around almost 13 years of age. When Opa came back from one of his trips to Germany in, I think it was January of 1946, he came back with 3 Torah scrolls. At first, they were brought to Congregation Beth Hillel in Washington Heights, where Rabbi Beerwald from München was the rabbi. But then as my brother and I got closer to bar mitzvah age, Opa gave us each a Torah, and my brother still has his in California. I had an argument with my synagogue, actually over same-sex marriage. I asked if 2 boys would ever be able to get married, and when my teacher yelled at me I said, one day there'll be a gay synagogue, not using that term, and I will bring the Torah there. So Opa then gave me this Megillah that I was able to donate to the synagogue at that time. The synagogue doesn't exist anymore. The Megillah has been given back to me. I am trying to find a place in Germany now that I can donate the Megillah to. Either, ideally, my dream is to have in Uffenheim a museum to create a permanent collection to the Jews that lived in the area and make it in honor of my Opa and Oma, and that I would supply several Judaica and artifacts that came from Uffenheim to the museum, and that maybe on Purim they would allow a neighboring synagogue to be able to read from the Megillah. My synagogue read from the Megillah last Purim, and an interesting note, my Hebrew name is Mordechai, my grandpa's name was Mordechai, and my grandma's name was Esther. This was one of his other Torahs. One of them is now, I believe, in a synagogue in Erlangen. And then I donated in 2005 the Torah that I had to Congregation Beth Shalom in München, and it's still there. And as I said, the third Torah is in California with my brother. Here's a picture of Martin with one of the Torahs, obviously not the one that I had. And then Martin dies in June of 1968. His wife, in America, Elsie, lived until 1998, until she was 96 years old. And the next video that I'm making is about the Kramer family from Friedberg, so I will describe her life in that video. Here I am in 2005. I went back to Germany, to München. We had a processional when I was donating the Torah to Congregation Beth Shalom. And I had written my speeches in English. And when I came home, I said to my father that, do you know, I drank a Radler Mass, and by the end of the evening, I was not only understanding German, I was speaking German. So my father said to me, Ricky, you remember Opa? So I said, sure. He said, do you remember talking to Opa? So I said, yeah. Because Opa never learned English. Of course, it's in your head. So that's why ich spreche wie ein Fünfjähriger, and I'm not secure, and I'm living here. I'm filming this in my walk-in closet all by myself. So there's no one, if I can't think of a word to say, wie sagt man das auf Deutsch? So, but I actually said the speech, three of them, the processional speech, the one when I ended up in the synagogue, and that night it was Shavuos, and I gave a program where I tried my best to give it all in German. One day, I don't know what's going to happen with these little videos that I'm making, but one day I hope to be able to do something not inside my walk-in closet, and vielleicht kann ich das auf Deutsch. Here I am at Congregation Beth Shalom with the Torah from Opa and this parochet, this green ark cover. I looked at it, wasn't familiar or anything, but I turned it over, and in the corner it said, donated by Mrs. Beerwald in honor of my husband, Congregation Beth Hillel. So it's a long story of how it went to a flea market and whatever, but the ark cover and the Torah were both at Congregation Beth Hillel in Washington Heights at one point in time. Another Beshert story. Now, getting to another Beshert story. Uffenheim had a matzah factory. And my friend who lives in Uffenheim actually went and took this picture, and the oven and everything is still in the cellar of this building in Uffenheim. Now you say, why am I bringing this up? Here comes another Beshert coincidence. So this is my father, the man who was born in Augsburg, who liberated Augsburg and Dachau. His grandfather, who was born in Galicia and lived in Munich and died in Theresienstadt, one of the ways he made money, he was a salesman for the Uffenheimer matzah factory. So and he lived at 20 Ickstadtstraße. That's where the processional started with the Torah. But when my friend from Uffenheim sent me this, that there was a matzah factory in Uffenheim, and you look at the bottom, it says G. Landmann 20 Ickstadtstraße. What the coincidence that this is how I learned that my great-grandfather was the salesman traveling back and forth from Munich to Uffenheim. And who knows? There were not that many Jews in Uffenheim at that time. Maybe my father's grandfather bumped into my great-grandfather on the streets or something in Uffenheim. Now, this here is a close-up of the Megillah that, again, I am hoping to find a way to get the right home in Germany and to donate it to either something in Uffenheim or in one of the towns that are near, in between Uffenheim, Nurnberg, even Augsburg. This is part of why I'm making this video. We'll see what happens. Now, Martin was also an artist, and I would love to be able to donate some of his paintings. This was just a pen sketching that he did in 1907 that I still have. Now, this is a different story. When Opa was growing up on Schmiedsgasse, there was a man named Therauf, and it should have an umlaut over the U. I don't know how to do that on the computer. He was a metalwork artist. I believe some of the churches, the doors and things were done by Herr Therauf. He became ill, and Martin took care of him. And when he passed away, his metal collection was given to Martin. And Martin took care of it and had it go from Uffenheim to Nurnberg, from Nurnberg to Strasbourg, from Strasbourg to Washington Heights, and now I have his collection. And this again is something, I'm in my 70s, I have no children. This would be something that I would love to see going back to Germany, possibly even Uffenheim, as part of the collection. This is Opa's Kiddush cup that to this day we still use it on Pesach, on Passover, for Elijah's cup. This is again one of the shofars that he brought brought to America. And this is a sort of sad story. When I was like 10, 11 years old, all of these things were in my parents' basement. And I had no idea what this red velvet, we called it a shmata. We didn't know what it was. Years later, when I donate the material to the Jewish Museum in Manhattan, they explained to me that used to be an ark cover, but that a piece of it was missing. Well, I took a cuticle scissor and I cut this 10 Commandments off of what I thought was a ragged piece of material that Opa used to wrap up the Torahs when he brought them to America. I didn't know they were an ark cover. So one day when I get even older, this shouldn't go back to Germany. This should go back to the ark cover, the parochet, that is in the Jewish Museum. And they should figure out how to sew it back on again. Now, although it wasn't in this frame, Opa had, next to the bed where he died, he had a picture of his mother, a painting. He had this Jude. He had several other things. And on the day that he died, he left the hospital. He wanted to die at home. He had a nurse, and they put a package of things together. And Opa was still able to write. He wrote An Ricky, and he put these packages of things together. And this Jude was one of them. Now again, he left in 1933. This is not something that he wore. To the best of my putting the pieces together, when he went back again in the 1940s, anything that was Jewish that he found, he would buy and he would bring home. So this is a real Jude, but this is not something that was worn by my family. All right, so now the next thing, before I end, Opa, for a living, and Oma in Macy's, would sell porcelain. And Opa would wake me up when I would stay over at his house in Washington Heights, and he would say to me, Ricky, in German, komm mit mir. And he would show me the different, this is Meissen, this is Rosenthal, this is Hutchenreuter. And he would explain what all those figurines were. And then when he was finished, he would take this and he would say, Ricky, everything else you can sell. This was given to me by my mother right before she died. You can never sell this. So I still have it. It's in my bedroom and I will not sell that. But one day I will have to figure out what to do with all of the figurines. Now the other thing is, and again I'm thinking back 60 years, Opa did tell me the story of this lock, but I am not 100% sure anymore. In my mind, I don't know if this is from Uffenheim, Nurnberg, or Strasbourg. But I remember him saying when he was leaving, he knew he was never coming back to that place. And there was a gate. So it might have been a backyard gate in Uffenheim because I see the front doesn't have a gate. And he says, I locked the gate. And then I said, what am I doing? Why should I lock the gate? So he took the lock. And somehow I still have the lock. So now what I'd like to do is, I did write a book. I don't know how you would get it in Germany. It's not really widely known. It's only part 1. I haven't finished part 2, but during COVID it kept me busy. I do have a website, infotrue.com. You can also go on it and click on my family stories of most of what I said today. You would be able to see on the website. It also does have the book where in America you click on it to the publisher Shakespeare and Company and they would send you a copy of it in America. I do not know how you would buy it in Germany. But this is the website that I started in 1997 dealing with issues of German, Jewish, Holocaust, and LGBT issues and how all of them intertwine in my life. So again, this is a almost 45-minute video that I made on Martin Oettinger and his being a proud German Jew, why I am a little bit different having a German Jewish cultural background, how my family was all refugees, my mother's side and my father's side, how lucky I was to be able to have on my mother's side most of the people get out, including my great-grandmother and grandfather. And I want to end this video with the words that my grandpa would always say to me, nur gesund. Whenever people would say, what do you want? His answer would always be, nur gesund. So if anyone wants to contact me, you can do it through my website. And again, I don't know what's going to happen with this, but I hope that in years to come, you'll be able to go to a museum in Germany and see things from Martin Oettinger's side of the family. You can now go to Augsburg to the Jewish Museum and see the United States Army uniform that my father wore when he entered Augsburg and his lederhosen that he wore when he went to Dachau. They have a collection there about the Landmann side of the family. Also, vielen Dank, Wiedersehen.